And now, shooting a group shot with Action Force and G.I. Joe Classified. Is that even allowed? Am I supposed to be ultra serious right now? Alright people, here's how this is gonna do. First, I'm showing you the 3 figures I'll be using in the shot. We have Action Force's Duster, G.I. Joe Classified's Rock and Roll, and Action Force's Eclipse. Seriously, why do I have the feeling I'm gonna get in trouble? Here is all the stuff I may or may not be using in this shot. Here we have an iPad for a potential light source using the Best Nightlight app. We have splosions. We have trash bags. We have a dumpster. Of course, we have my old reliable diorama brought to you by High School Creations. 1 LED light. 2 LED light. Okay, I'm gonna stop that because that's getting old for even me. Here's a 3rd LED. Gels/filters I may or may not use on the 3 LEDs. The Red Yeti to hold up the iPad if necessary. And finally, the stand for my ultra fancy iPhone. Oh, and the ultra fancy camera I'll be looking through that you guys won't be seeing. Of course, everything you see in this video will have links in the video description below. Affiliate links. Buy! Consume! Alright, for this part of the video, we're gonna pose these figures and we're gonna set them up in a group. Now, your mileage may vary, but I found that for me, when it comes to group shots, it's always best to focus on a specific figure, and that focus is gonna be on Rock and Roll. He just hasn't gotten enough love from the channel, so when it comes to focusing the camera, he's gonna be the sharpest one. He's also gonna be the one I concentrate on when it comes to lighting. I found that if I do that, I focus on one figure, the image ends up with a lot more dimension. If I try to focus on everybody and use a really high number when it comes to my aperture, everything kind of gets muddy and blends together. I don't want that. So we're focusing on Mr. McConnell. Is it just me, or is my voice getting a little more movie announcer guy as we go? So after we set up the figures, then I'll drop all the effects in that I can find. Chances are, if I use one of these explosions, I'll actually light it with the flashlight from the iPhone. And after I get all that set up, I'm going to check out my effects library, I'm going to throw it all in Photoshop, and whatever I don't have, I'm going to bust out Midjourney. I know, AI, it's going to kill us all. But it's going to make for pretty pictures until it does. And then at the end of the video, you'll get to see the final result. So, let's get cracking. All right, with Rock and Roll being the focus of the shot, I want to put him in a standing while firing hero pose. Now, the nice thing about standing poses generally is they're not so bad to pull off. They're pretty easy. One thing that I'm fighting when it comes to Rock and Roll here, though, is his gun. This piece here, I believe it's a drum, but I'm sure I'll get yelled at in the comments if I'm wrong. It keeps trying to fall off when I turn his arm. So I'm going to try this. I'm going to get tricky. I also have the bipod down because I just think it's a more interesting look. So you guys are getting a little peek into my brain, how I think about shooting these things. Okay. So here we go. There I go with the royal we again. I've got Rock and Roll off to the side a bit there. He's got the gun where the gun should be. Now I'm going to hold this piece in, and I'm telling you guys this so that if you decide to try a similar shot with your Rock and Roll, bam, you're going to be able to think about it while you're setting things up. So, we've got Rock going there. It's always a little more interesting to bend as much as you can, even in a standing pose. At least I've found that to be the case. So I'm going to do a little bit of this. Drop this, raise this. It's all subtlety, but it all has to work. Has to make me happy, just like your shot has to make you happy. Now, I'd say we'll try angling his head back a little bit more. Yeah, I think we're pretty good with that. So I'll just put him back here. Now something else that I'm going to need to add, and I'll show you right now, is this Valaverse Blast Effect piece. This is kind of tough to see there. Let's try that. There we go. That's trying to autofocus a little better. But yeah, that's a Valaverse piece that I'm going to slot into Rock and Roll's gun here. Of course, I'm going to try and do this on camera, which is far trickier than you guys would think. Oh, get in there. Oh my gosh, we're so close. There we go. And it doesn't fit perfectly. It's a little loose. So I'm going to have to play with it a little bit a little later. You can see it's down. Pull it down. There we go. That's a little better. So there's Rock and Roll, all good and posed up and ready for the shot. Whew, I feel like I need a break after that. Nah. Here's Action Forces Duster, whom I'm gonna put in a crouching pose, so you'll get to see what I think about when it comes to, well, a crouching pose. So I'm going to leave his upper body pretty much like that. I might raise... There, yeah. I think I should raise his gun a little bit. And maybe bring his eyes down a touch. Gotta love that you just lost focus. Sorry about that. So, we've got this probably much closer to what we really want. And oddly enough, the Valaverse shot here, the gun blast, it works perfectly in Duster's gun. So now you're going to twist a little bit, just a touch. Doesn't need to go nuts. And I've also got him tilted forward a little bit too at the waist. And now bring this leg up as much as possible. And I'll be making adjustments. Like as I'm looking through here right now, I see that he's tucked too low, that he's kind of shooting at the ground, and I don't want that. So I'll be making fine adjustments going on. And now it depends kind of, generally I would say you want to bend above the knee, but for Duster right now, I think what I want to do, because I want his knee to hit the ground, I'm going to lock it at the top joint, the top bend, and I'm going to bend just the bottom one. And that should make it so that he's able to be on the ground a little easier. I'm also going to see how much bend I can get on his foot. There we go. A little bit. And now I'm going to be making the subtle changes, subtle adjustments here. Seeing what I can do. I've got, I know it's difficult to see. Here we go. That is what I'm fighting right now, is the knee at the bottom there is kind of being finicky. It's not quite balancing enough. So one trick I might use is kick the leg out a little bit this way, and kick this leg out a little bit this way, and then use the rocker ankle just a touch to try and get his feet a little flatter. And it's a little precarious. It's there, but not. I'm going to bring him up a bit. That doesn't look as good. This is all the finicky little things that I mess with when I'm doing this. You know what? Here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lean this forward just a bit and bring this foot back. That way, that should give him a little more balance. And now he does have a little more balance, to the point where now I do need to lean him, it looks like. These are all just the subtle twists and turns and moves that you have to do to get these things in position for the perfect shot, at least the shot you want. Oopsie, moving the camera. Oh man. Okay guys, this is something that I didn't plan on you having to go through all that much. Okay, I think we've got it now. I think we've got a pose for Duster. There was a lot of finagling with the legs. And one thing I want to make sure I do when I do this is I want to make sure that Duster is kind of overlapping rock and roll. Good Lord, man. I want to make sure that he's overlapping rock and roll a little bit just because that adds a little more dimension to the shot. So this isn't at all going to be the final setup, but you're kind of understanding what I'm thinking as I'm setting all this stuff up. Now, let's go on to Eclipse. All right, I've had Eclipse in this pose for forever. It's awesome. It's sweet. She's a very cool figure, but I think what I'm going to need to do is get her just a little lower. I'm not going to crouch her quite like I've got Duster, but she is going to go just a little lower. There's probably going to be a little bit of waist adjustment. I don't know that there's really going to be a whole lot of adjustment when it comes to anything above the waist. There might be slight bending, but not a whole lot. Now, because her torso is tilted this way, then this is the leg that I want to make sure is moving forward. So there we go. There I go. Ha ha ha. There it is again. And then this leg, want to have going back this way. Now this is going to be kind of tricky. This is one of those figures where, not because of the figure itself, but because of the pose, any second that I don't take the picture, she might fall. So, just so you guys are aware, I'm sure you've set up things like this before. Toy photography, when balance must be on point. All right, now you see with Eclipse, she's tilting a little bit this way. So, what I'm going to do is just bring her up a little bit right at the hip. That's closer. Now I'll just tilt her a little back there at the waist. Bring this gun up. And I think, I was close. I think I might have a pose for Eclipse. I might try and make a subtle adjustment to make it so she looks a little straighter. In fact, I'm just going to do that right now. There she is. There she blows. All right, now Eclipse is looking pretty rad. And again, I want to make sure that when I'm setting up these figures in the group, that they're kind of overlapping each other. I don't want anything to kind of just sort of meet on the side. So I'll show you what I'm talking about right now with Duster. If Duster were lined up, say, right here, see how that line of the building meets his elbow pretty much directly. You don't want that kind of thing necessarily. Even worse is if you just line his body up with that, because what happens there is you lose a little bit of dimension in the shot. So that's why it's so important to try and overlap whenever you can. Even when I'm looking at rock and roll back here, I want to make sure whenever I set him up that his head isn't going to be kind of lined up directly with any of the bars coming down in front of the windows. So those are just things that I think about when I'm setting up shots. And here's Eclipse once more, because I can. Truly, I'm a photo nerd. Okay, it's time to start standing them up how they're gonna be in the shot. And remember, there's gonna be subtle adjustments all the way throughout this whole thing because I have to walk back to the camera and keep looking through there. So I'm gonna start by putting the focus of the shot right up front here. And then I'm gonna want Eclipse. One thing you have to be careful about when setting up these shots is you don't want them to line up exactly with each other as far as where their heads are pointing. Their heads, if I'm going to line up 3 of them, I want each head to be pointed just in a slightly different direction. So I had Eclipse, and now Eclipse is being a pain. But that's okay. She's a pretty sweet figure, so I'm good with it. Okay, there she is. There's rock and roll. And now if I've got rock and roll like that, facing that way, we definitely don't want it to look like he's shooting Duster in the back of the head. So that's something else to keep in mind when I'm messing with this. Turn this blast effect ever so slightly. Try to get it so it's not pointing in a way. There we go. That's pretty good. Now, here's those subtle adjustments I'm talking about. That blast effect is going to hate me for this one. There I go. Remember, we want some overlap, so I'll put Duster there. Now, one thing that's going to happen, because I have Duster basically right lined up with rock and roll, is they'll both be in focus. So what I might do is prop Duster a little more up here. Perhaps bring rock and roll a little more forward. There we go, because there's still that overlap going on. And then just a touch more overlap with Eclipse there. You can see where overlap is happening there, where her leg is crossing over rock and roll's leg. And right now, I'd say we've got a pretty decent group set up, but generally I like them to be a little more bunched together. Just a little bit, but I've kind of blown that with the way that I set up Duster's legs. Because the way Duster's legs are set up, for me to make it a little closer, more like how I'd like it, I'd need to straighten out this leg. So I'm going to do that real quick here. Don't worry, these are all the things that I constantly think about as I'm working on this stuff, or I constantly have to deal with. And that wasn't so bad. That ended up working out. So I've got Duster a little more bunched up there with rock and roll. And now I'm going to bunch Eclipse up a little bit more with rock and roll. All right, so we've got Eclipse, we've got rock and roll, and we've got Duster. Now, the next part is I'm just going to go back, look at the camera real quick, then make subtle adjustments to whatever's going on here so it all fits in frame, and then I'm going to come back and play with extras. All right, I think I've got the figures good and lined up, at least as far as the camera's concerned. By the way, the lens I'm using is a 75 to 300 millimeter telephoto lens. Now, let's start playing with all the craziness that I can throw in the shot. All right, now something I know I'm going to want to have in here is a splosion. Yeah. Now, remember that when I use this, I'm going to light it up using the iPhone's flashlight. So near the end of this, you're going to see these things all lit up using the lights the way I want to use them, but you're not going to see this until after the photo's actually shot because, well, I'm recording with the iPhone. All right, now remember that part of this is making sure the light is definitely hitting rock and roll, just to make sure that we've got everything differentiated and the picture doesn't look all that muddy. So what I'm going to do is use that back LED, bring it a lot closer, and just kind of light up his back a little bit. Now what's probably going to happen is these two are going to get some light as well. It's okay, I'm good with that. It's just I feel that if I focus on one character individually, specifically making rock and roll the focus, like I said earlier, that everything else just kind of works itself out and the image itself doesn't end up all muddy. So I'm going to make that light adjustment right now. And there's the LED all leaned up against the building. After adjusting that first light, there's the second light. What I did was I put the yellow gel in front of the LED because they're all firing their weapons, so I figured it made sense to hit this with a little bit of yellow light. And after that light, there was more yellow going on. That's right, I have multiple sets of gels. So this is how they're looking in the front right now. All kinds of yellow pointing at them because they're firing. Things are getting all dramatic and stuff. All right, I'm going to start adding some extras because one of the things that really helps sell a shot is you've got the background with the diorama and then you've got kind of the midground with the characters, but you need the foreground. So I'll be using things like these trash bags, possibly these crates here to make sure and kind of just fill in the foreground a little bit, which also will help give the image a lot more dimension. So I'm going to start doing that. By the way, the same rules apply when setting up all the stuff in the foreground. You don't want anything to line up with anything else exactly because you're going to lose dimension in the shot. We don't want to lose dimension in the shot. That's lame. All right, I pretty much got it set up the way I want it. Got the figures there, we've got stuff in the foreground, we have a little bit going on in the background with the dio. We've got that LED, we've got that LED, we've got that LED. Now, something else I've got to do is, like I said earlier, I'm going to put the iPhone underneath the explosion effect to give it that extra bit of light, and I'm also going to take the iPad and hold it just over the figures because there's not enough dimension popping them out from the background. You can kind of see that their helmets are dark and all that, and it's kind of blending in with the dial. I don't want that. I want them to stand out. So in the middle of the shot, when I have it set so that the shutter speed takes a little bit of time, I'm just going to be holding the iPad over them like this. Good times. Tricks of the trade, I think. Oh, it's nice to get out of that dark room. So here's the image as it came out of the camera. And this is me recording a voiceover because I totally forgot to do audio for this part. After it came out of the camera, I made a few color tweaks in Photoshop. I also added 2 layers of this haze effect. Available for free on the Toypixx Patreon page. Don't worry, link in the description. I also created these bullets using Midjourney to put in front of Rock and Roll's machine gun. Oh. Those were okay for a one-time use, but what I'm going to do in the future is create a bullets coming out of a machine gun graphic that I'll put on the Patreon for anybody to grab for free. And ladies and gentlemen, this is the final image of everything that you saw happening in this video. I set up the shot, which you got to see. I took the picture and you saw the end results of that. Then I told you a little bit of what I did in the Photoshop. Don't worry. I will be doing more Photoshop tutorials in the future, but this video, I figured we'd just focus more on the setup of the shot. I figured I'd end this back in the studio so I look ultra professional, which I'm sure you guys are totally buying. So, that's it for this one, gang. Do me a solid, comment below and let me know. Is this kind of video something you'd like to see more of? Was it helpful for you? Did ya dig it? And most importantly, can you do G.I. Joe Classified and Action Force at the same time? I can. Yeah, I said it. And with that, thank you as always for watching. Have fun and happy snapping. See ya. Oh man, I hope the comments aren't too ugly. Putting Action Force with G.I. Joe, this is like cats and dogs living together. This is Venkman style. This stuff is going to get crazy. People are going to be angry in the comments. Did I give Action Force enough time? Did I give Classified enough time? Are people going to be mad because I focused on rock and roll? These are the kinds of things you have to worry about when you do an Action Force and a G.I. Joe Classified video. Well, most people have to worry about it. I really don't care.